It all began on a warm summer afternoon when I decided to install a modest pool in my backyard, a simple rectangular oasis where my family and I could cool off during the blistering heat. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a blue-tiled in-ground pool with small deck and a few lounge chairs scattered around. But to us, it was paradise. The sound of splashing water and laughter filled our weekends, turning our home into the go-to spot for neighborhood barbecues and pool parties. Life felt perfect until the day I received a letter from the HOA. A cold, impersonal notice slipped into my mailbox, demanding the immediate removal of my beloved pool. They cited some obscure regulation about unauthorized modifications, claiming my pool violated aesthetic uniformity, whatever that meant. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely, they couldn't be serious about tearing down something that brought so much joy. But when I attended the next HOA meeting to plead my case, I quickly realized they weren't just serious. They were dead set on making an example out of me. The board members, a group of stern-faced individuals who seemed to thrive on enforcing petty rules, dismissed my arguments without a second thought. They claimed the pool clashed with the neighborhood's visual harmony, despite half the houses sporting mismatched shutters and overgrown lawns. Their rigid stance baffled me, especially since I had seen other homes with far more egregious violations go unnoticed. Frustration simmered beneath my polite exterior as I left that meeting. Their smug faces burned into my memory. Over the next few weeks, I received a barrage of fines and threats of legal action if I didn't comply. My once peaceful evenings were now spent poring over HOA bylaws, trying to find a loophole or any justification for their sudden vendetta. Friends and neighbors expressed sympathy, but most were too wary of the HOA's power to openly support me. I felt isolated, cornered in my own home, and the pool that once symbolized relaxation now represented a battleground. The tipping point came when they sent a formal notice, giving me 30 days to dismantle the pool or face escalating penalties. That night, as I sat by the water's edge, staring at the reflection of the moon rippling across the surface, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to make a statement. If they thought a simple pool was a problem, they hadn't seen anything yet. The gears in my mind started turning, fueled by a mix of stubbornness and creativity. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but one thing was certain. I wasn't about to let the HO bully me into submission. This was the beginning of something much bigger than a backyard dispute. Little did they know, their unreasonable demands had just set the stage for the most outrageous project our neighborhood had ever seen. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to turn the tide one splash at a time. The moment I decided to stand my ground, the HOA shifted into overdrive, determined to crush any form of resistance. It started subtly enough. Additional fines trickled in for unrelated petty infractions like grass length violations and improperly stored trash bins, infractions they'd previously overlooked. It was clear they were trying to bury me under a mountain of bureaucracy, hoping the weight of their incessant demands would break my resolve. But I wasn't budging. I attended every HOA meeting, standing tall in front of their panel of rule enforcers, challenging their decisions with meticulously prepared arguments and an unwavering stare. Each time, they dismissed me with rehearsed legal jargon and condescending smirks, their confidence fueled by years of unchecked authority. I wasn't just fighting for my pool anymore. I was fighting against a system that thrived on control and intimidation. Word of my defiance began to ripple through the neighborhood, sparking hushed conversations and cautious glances from neighbors who were both intrigued and terrified by my audacity. Some offered quiet words of encouragement, while others warned me of the HOA's ruthless tactics. I learned about past residents who dared to challenge the board, only to be met with relentless fines, legal threats, and, in some cases, forced relocations. But I was different. I had no intention of backing down, no matter how many obstacles they threw in my path. As weeks turned into months, the HOA escalated their efforts, hiring legal counsel to draft increasingly aggressive letters and threatening lawsuits that loomed like dark clouds over my home. They even attempted to rally the neighborhood against me, painting me as a disruptive force threatening the peace and order of our community. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, filled with exaggerated claims about the dangers of unauthorized pools and the importance of strict adherence to HOA guidelines. But instead of isolating me, their smear campaign had the opposite effect. Neighbors who'd once been silent began to question the HOA's motives, their eyes opening to the absurdity of the board's actions. The more they tried to demonize me, the more people started to see the cracks in their authority. I could sense the shift in the air, a subtle undercurrent of rebellion stirring beneath the surface. Determined to maintain their grip, the HOA doubled down on their legal threats, filing official complaints and demanding court hearings. But I was ready. I hired a lawyer of my own, a sharp, no-nonsense professional who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for dismantling overreaching boards piece by piece. Together, we pored over every clause, every regulation, searching for inconsistencies and loopholes we could exploit. The more we uncovered, the more it became apparent that the HOA had overstepped their boundaries in multiple areas, their eagerness to control blinding them to their own legal missteps. Armed with this knowledge, we countered every threat with calculated precision, turning their own rules against them. The courtroom battles were grueling, filled with tense exchanges and legal maneuvering, but with each small victory, my confidence grew. Despite the mounting tension, I found moments of solace in the support I received from unexpected places. Neighbors who'd once kept their distance now approached me with stories of their own grievances against the HOA, sharing tales of arbitrary fines and unjust rulings. What started as a personal battle was slowly transforming into a collective struggle, a shared desire to reclaim our neighborhood from the oppressive grip of the HOA. The board sensed this shift and responded with even more drastic measures, attempting to push through new regulations designed to tighten their control. But their efforts only fueled the growing resistance, solidifying the community's support for my cause. As the pressure mounted, I realized that this wasn't just about my pool anymore. It was about standing up to a system that had gone unchecked for far too long. The HOA had underestimated me, believing that their threats and fines would be enough to force me into submission. But they were wrong. With every obstacle they placed in my path, my resolve only strengthened. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every neighbor who'd ever felt powerless against the HOA's tyranny. And as the battle raged on, one thing became clear. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to make sure they never forgot the day they tried to take down my pool. One evening, as I sat in my backyard, staring at the pool that had become the epicenter of this conflict, an idea began to take shape, an idea so bold, so audacious, that it made me chuckle despite the weight of the ongoing battle. If the HOA thought my modest pool was a problem, what would they do if I turned my entire backyard into a water park? The thought was both ridiculous and exhilarating. I grabbed a notebook and began sketching out ideas, letting my imagination run wild. Slides spiraled in my mind, fountains erupted from the ground, and a lazy river meandered through a landscape of rebellion. The more I planned, the more I realized this wasn't just a fantasy. It was a declaration. If they wanted to play hardball, I was more than ready to up the stakes. The first step was to dig deep into the HOA's bylaws, looking for any loopholes that could support my outrageous plan. To my surprise, there were gaps and ambiguities in their regulations, technicalities that, if navigated correctly, could allow me to proceed without violating any official rules. It turned out that while pools were tightly regulated, water features were a gray area. The definitions were vague, leaving room for interpretation, and I intended to interpret them in the most creative way possible. I consulted with legal experts, architects, and even a few rebellious contractors who were more than eager to stick it to an overbearing HOA. Each consultation added new layers to my plan, transforming my backyard vision into a detailed blueprint for the ultimate act of defiance. As the design took shape, I began gathering the necessary permits, carefully ensuring that every step was legally sound. The HOA might have been able to bully me over a pool, but a legally sanctioned water park was an entirely different beast. I reveled in the irony. Their rigid adherence to rules was about to become their greatest weakness. I documented every approval, every correspondence, building a fortress of legality around my project that would be nearly impossible to breach. With each hurdle I cleared, my excitement grew. This wasn't just about beating the HOA anymore. It was about creating something extraordinary, something that would make a statement loud and clear. When the day of groundbreaking finally arrived, I could feel the tension in the air. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, their curiosity piqued by the sudden flurry of activity in my backyard. As construction equipment rolled in and workers began transforming the space, whispers spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The HOA quickly caught wind of the project and sent representatives to investigate, their faces a mix of disbelief and fury when they realized what I was doing. They demanded explanations, threatened immediate cease and desist orders, but I met them with calm, confident responses, armed with the documentation that proved every inch of my project was within legal bounds. The more they pushed, the more resolute I became. The sight of towering water slides and the sound of construction filled the neighborhood, drawing crowds of curious onlookers. Children pressed their faces against fences, eyes wide with anticipation, while parents exchanged amused glances. What started as a personal rebellion was quickly becoming a community spectacle. The HOA's frustration was palpable, their authority slipping through their fingers with every passing day. They tried to rally the neighborhood against me once more, but this time, their efforts fell flat. People were tired of the board's heavy-handed tactics, and my project had become a symbol of resistance against their oppressive rule. As the water park neared completion, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. What began as a simple desire to keep my pool had evolved into a full-blown movement, challenging the very foundation of the HOA's power. The park was more than just a collection of slides and fountains. It was a testament to the power of creativity, determination, and a refusal to be bullied. And as I stood at the top of the tallest slide, looking out over the transformed landscape of my backyard, I knew one thing for certain, that I had picked the wrong person to mess with. The spark of rebellion had ignited a fire they couldn't extinguish, and the waves of change were just beginning to ripple through the community. With the foundation of my rebellion firmly in place, the construction phase of the water park became a spectacle unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. The once quiet street buzzed with the sounds of jackhammers, cement mixers, and the rhythmic pounding of hammers as my backyard transformed from a modest suburban lawn into an aquatic wonderland. The towering slides and winding lazy river began to take shape, their vibrant colors and bold structures standing in stark contrast to the uniform beige facades of the surrounding houses. Every morning, I watched from my kitchen window as crews of workers tackled the next phase of the project, their energy and enthusiasm mirroring my own. The sight of progress was a daily reminder that I was not only defying the HOA, but creating something truly extraordinary. The HOA, predictably, was apoplectic. They launched a barrage of complaints and attempted to halt construction through every bureaucratic means at their disposal. Inspectors were sent to my property almost daily, scrutinizing every nail and pipe in hopes of finding a violation they could exploit. But thanks to meticulous planning and an airtight legal strategy, every attempt to derail the project was met with frustration and failure. I relished the sight of HOA representatives standing at the edge of my property, their faces twisted in impotent rage as they realized they were powerless to stop me. Their desperation was palpable, and their once firm grip on the neighborhood's compliance began to loosen with every passing day. As the structures grew taller and the features more elaborate, the neighborhood's curiosity turned to admiration. Children could be heard excitedly discussing the backyard water park, and families began to linger near my property, eager to catch a glimpse of the latest additions. The buzz created a ripple effect, drawing media attention and turning my defiance into a local news story. Reporters flocked to my home, cameras capturing the vivid spectacle of water slides and splash zones rising amidst the otherwise mundane suburbia. The narrative quickly shifted from a disgruntled homeowner to a community hero standing up against the oppressive HOA. The public support was overwhelming, and even those who had initially been skeptical found themselves swept up in the excitement. The more the HOA tried to clamp down, the more they exposed their own pettiness and lack of real power. Their attempts to frame me as a disruptive nuisance backfired spectacularly as the neighborhood rallied behind me. Barbecues and block parties began to spring up in solidarity, with neighbors openly mocking the HOA's futile efforts. What had started as a personal vendetta had blossomed into a full-scale movement, and the HOA's authority was crumbling under the weight of collective defiance. The final stages of construction were a whirlwind of activity. The lazy river snaked gracefully around the perimeter of the yard, complete with inflatable tubes and gentle currents. Water slides of varying heights twisted and turned, promising thrills for all ages. A splash pad with fountains and water cannons provided endless entertainment for younger children, while shaded cabanas offered a place for parents to relax and socialize. The piece de resistance was a towering, multi-level play structure with cascading waterfalls and hidden tunnels, a true testament to the creativity and determination that had fueled the entire project. As the finishing touches were applied and the last of the construction equipment was hauled away, I stood at the entrance of my backyard water park, a sense of pride and accomplishment washing over me. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but the result was more than I could have ever imagined. The HOA had tried to crush my spirit, but instead, they had ignited a spark that had grown into a blazing fire of rebellion and community unity. The water park wasn't just a victory over petty bureaucracy. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people stood up against injustice and refused to be bullied. The grand opening was a celebration like no other. Neighbors and friends gathered in droves, their laughter and cheers echoing through the streets as they explored the vibrant, water-filled wonderland. The HOA members, unable to deny the overwhelming support and joy radiating from the community, were forced to stand on the sidelines, their authority reduced to little more than a distant memory. As I watched families splash and play, I knew that this was more than just a personal triumph. It was a turning point for the entire neighborhood. The water park had become a beacon of resilience and defiance, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. And as the sun set over the shimmering water, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that I had not only won the battle, but had also created something that would bring joy and inspiration for years to come. With the water park now a vibrant centerpiece of the community, the neighborhood's spirit had undergone a dramatic transformation. What once had been a collection of isolated homes, cautiously abiding by the HOA's rigid rules, had become a united front fueled by a newfound sense of camaraderie and defiance. The laughter of children echoed through the streets, mingling with the cheerful conversations of neighbors who had, for the first time in years, found common ground in their shared rebellion. The water park wasn't just a symbol of my personal victory. It had become a rallying point for the entire community, a beacon of hope that things could change when people stood together against oppression. The HOA, recognizing their dwindling influence, made desperate attempts to regain control. They called emergency meetings, issued new fines, and even tried to implement stricter regulations, hoping to intimidate the community back into submission. But the neighborhood had tasted freedom, and there was no going back. Attendance at HOA meetings surged, not with the usual quiet compliance, but with voices raised in protest. Homeowners who had once been too afraid to speak out now stood boldly, demanding transparency and fairness from the very people who had long ruled with an iron fist. Public confrontations between the HOA and the community became increasingly common. Heated debates erupted during meetings, spilling over into the streets as neighbors refused to be silenced. The HOA board members, once accustomed to unquestioned authority, found themselves overwhelmed and outnumbered. Flyers circulated throughout the neighborhood, not from the HOA, but from residents rallying support for a complete overhaul of the board. The movement gained momentum, and soon a formal petition was drafted, calling for the resignation of the current HOA leadership. The tension reached its peak when the HOA attempted to legally challenge the water park once again, this time citing safety concerns and alleged zoning violations. But the community, now well-versed in the legal intricacies thanks to my earlier battles, was ready. We pooled resources to hire a top-tier legal team, one that specialized in community advocacy and was passionate about protecting homeowners' rights. The legal proceedings became a public spectacle, drawing media attention and further galvanizing the neighborhood's resolve. Courtrooms were packed with residents, their presence a silent yet powerful testament to our unity and determination. As the legal battle raged on, the HOA's grip on the community continued to weaken. Their attempts to enforce compliance were met with open defiance, and their authority eroded with each passing day. The once feared board members became the subject of neighborhood jokes and satire, their power reduced to little more than empty threats. The community had found its voice, and it wasn't about to be silenced. In a final act of desperation, the HOA called for a vote to impose new, draconian regulations aimed at curbing the community's newfound freedom. But the vote backfired spectacularly. Residents turned out in record numbers, not to support the HOA, but to vote them out entirely. The election results were a landslide, with the entire board being replaced by members who truly represented the community's interests. The day the new board took office was one of celebration and relief. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the neighborhood for years lifted, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. The water park, once the battleground of a bitter conflict, now stood as a symbol of what could be achieved when people stood together against injustice. In the weeks and months that followed, the neighborhood flourished. Community events became a regular occurrence, with block parties, potlucks, and water park gatherings bringing people together like never before. The bonds formed during the struggle against the HOA grew stronger, creating a sense of unity and belonging that had been missing for far too long. The water park continued to thrive, attracting visitors from neighboring communities and serving as a reminder of the power of collective action. The story of our neighborhood's rebellion became an inspiration to others facing similar battles, a testament to the idea that ordinary people could stand up to oppressive systems and emerge victorious. As I stood at the heart of the water park, watching children play and neighbors laugh, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth every moment. The HOA had tried to tear down my pool, but in doing so, they had inadvertently built something far greater, a united, empowered community that would stand strong for years to come. And as the sun set over the shimmering water, I knew that this was more than just a personal victory. It was a triumph for us all. The day the new HOA board officially took over felt like the culmination of an epic saga, a hard-fought victory that resonated far beyond the confines of our little neighborhood. The community buzzed with an electrifying mix of relief and triumph, the oppressive shadow of the old board finally lifting to reveal a brighter, freer future. But for me, the real victory wasn't just in ousting the tyrannical HOA. It was in witnessing the transformation of a once fractured neighborhood into a tight-knit, supportive community. The water park, once a symbol of defiance, now stood as a monument to the power of resilience and unity. In the weeks following the HOA's fall, life in the neighborhood took on a new rhythm, one that pulsed with the sounds of laughter, splashing water, and lively conversations. The park became the heart of our community, drawing families from all corners of the neighborhood to its vibrant, sun-soaked grounds. Children raced down slides and floated lazily along the river, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the tension that had once defined our streets. Parents lounged in shady cabanas, sharing stories and building friendships that had previously seemed impossible under the HOA's rigid watch. But victory wasn't just about the water park's success, it was about the lasting changes that rippled through our community. The new HOA board, composed of neighbors who had stood shoulder to shoulder in our fight, prioritized transparency, fairness, and community engagement. Meetings transformed from tense, adversarial gatherings into open forums where every voice was heard and respected. Policies were revised to reflect the community's true needs and desires, fostering an environment of trust and collaboration. The days of arbitrary fines and petty power plays were over, replaced by a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. The water park itself continued to evolve, becoming more than just a recreational space. It hosted summer movie nights, charity fundraisers, and seasonal festivals that brought the entire community together. Local artists contributed murals and sculptures, adding vibrant, creative touches that reflected our neighborhood's unique spirit. The park even became a source of inspiration for neighboring communities facing their own HOA struggles, with visitors often seeking advice on how to reclaim their neighborhoods from overbearing boards. As the months turned into years, the story of our water park rebellion became a local legend, a testament to what could be achieved when ordinary people stood up against injustice. The media continued to cover our journey, highlighting the positive impact our victory had on the community. But beyond the headlines and accolades, the true reward was in the everyday moments, the spontaneous water balloon fights, the impromptu neighborhood cookouts, and the shared laughter that echoed through the park long after the sun had set. Reflecting on the journey, I often found myself marveling at how a simple pool, a modest backyard oasis, had sparked such a profound transformation. The HOA's attempt to tear it down had inadvertently ignited a movement, one that had reshaped our neighborhood in ways I could have never imagined. The pool was long gone, but in its place stood something far greater, a symbol of defiance, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of a community united against oppression. As I watched my neighbors enjoy the water park, their faces lit with joy and contentment, I knew that the battle had been worth every challenge, every sleepless night, and every confrontation. The HOA had underestimated us, believing their rules and regulations could stifle our spirit. But in the end, they had only strengthened our resolve, proving that when people stand together, they can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. And so, with the sun setting over the shimmering waters of the park, I took a deep breath and smiled. The journey had been long and arduous, but had led us to a place of joy, unity, and lasting victory. The water park wasn't just a testament to what we had overcome. It was a promise of the vibrant, resilient community we had built together. And as the waves gently lapped against the edges of the lazy river, I knew that our story was far from over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, laughter, and the unshakable bond of neighbors who had, against all odds, turned a simple act of defiance into a lasting legacy.